All right, and we're live now. So thank you all again for joining us tonight. This is the first webinar in a really exciting three-part webinar series. We have a lot of really exciting guest instructors lined up for you guys. And we just really appreciate you joining us for the first one. Hope that you can come back for the second and third webinar as well. If you don't mind, keep your camera off and your microphones muted until we get to the question section. And we'll take all the questions, throw them in the chat as they come up, and we will answer them at the end of the content. There will be a post-webinar survey for those of you who have joined us in Zoom. So be looking out for that communications just a little bit later from me. So tonight, we are going to be covering public land hunting opportunities in Kentucky. I'm Becky Wallen, the Field to Fork Coordinator for the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, and I am just your host tonight, so I'll be in the background the whole time, but we have a really awesome guest instructor tonight, and I am going to let Jacob introduce himself. I am going to replace you, Jacob, as the spotlight here. And you should be good to go.
All right, welcome everybody. Hopefully I'll give you some knowledge to help you out getting the field this year on the public lands of Kentucky. Just a little bit about myself. I've been with the department now for about 16 years. Worked in private lands a lot. Just recently started as the private lands coordinator, but that was as of January. Before that, I ran Clay Wildlife Management Area in the northeastern part of the state for the past 6 years. So in private lands right now, but a background in public land. So I'm going to try to cover some information from you all from everywhere, from the person who is just getting out and getting started hunting to hopefully give some stuff to some tools that even veteran people can use on our WMAs. So I'm going to jump in here and please bear with me. I'm definitely not a computer person, but I'll try to get you the information. Here we go. So again, what I'm going to cover is public lands in the state of Kentucky. So in the state of Kentucky, we have what we call the wildlife management areas, which is public land that the department owns and manages it for hunting and fishing recreation, which is all the way across the state. You can see the map at the bottom of the WMAs across the state. We'll dive into a little bit more of that as we go. We also have hunting access areas. A lot of those are in the east to deal with elk. And we'll kind of talk about the differences in those and where you can find the regs and what you can and cannot do on those areas as we go through the night. Statewide, we have 88 wildlife management areas. And I think I count up, there's another, 20 plus areas that are Fort Knox, Fort Campbell, and between the lakes, other areas that the public can hunt with other special regulations. Just the WMAs make up 523,000 acres available for the public to hunt. That is a large number across the state. And at this point, in the last survey we took, 19% of hunters utilize the WMAs to hunt. So there is a lot of land out there for you to get out and hunt across the state of Kentucky. And hopefully by the end of tonight, I'll introduce you to the WMAs, kind of some of the rules and some of the process of trying to start to utilize our WMAs. Again, I kind of covered this already, but just some opportunities on the WMAs. You got hunting, fishing, hiking, wildlife viewing, and on a few of the WMAs, there's target shooting. We have some ranges for rifles, and then we also have some trap shooting ranges on some of the WMAs. So that's one thing to think about when you go to use our public lands and the WMAs is all the different user groups that are using the WMAs, and to make sure you're respectful to each one of them. Most of the time you can get away. There's enough ground out there that you can get away and find a place to do your activity without having too much trouble. But it is always something to keep in mind that there are other people using these areas. All right, so what I'm going to dive into now is just an overview of public hunting in Kentucky. What you have here is the cover of our fresh off the press Kentucky hunting guide and trapping guide for the state of Kentucky. This right here is the key to trying to figure out what you're allowed to do, when, where, and how, not only on private land, but on public land. So I'm going to kind of go through the public land section of the hunting guide and show you what to use and highlight some key aspects of the public lands and what's allowed and not allowed on the public land. So when you go to try to use them, you can do it, by the rules and be effective. So I think Becky has put the link to the hunting guide in the chat that you can get to. This is on our webpage. You'll hear over and over again. You can go to our website, and that is at fw.ky.gov, and there's links to all this stuff there. So on page 26 of the hunting guide, you breaks out into the public land hunting and just kind of an overview, just kind of what it entails in general for every WMA, just overall rules and stuff that goes on. And it is really important before you jump onto the public lands that you sit down with the hunting guide and read through this and make sure that you understand what's being said. I'm going to just hit some highlights on this for you all. And if you have any questions, we can come back. I'm not going to sit here and read it all to you. So basically, the public land's open, and we're going to break into each one and kind of show you how you can figure out what species and seasons and that kind of stuff that each one is laid out. There's WMAs that run from open under statewide regs to being very stringent on what you can do on the WMA. So it's really important to look through and know the guide, and I'll show you how to do that as we go forward. Some things to point out in this section is some of our WMAs do allow camping, and that is only in designated areas on designated WMAs. It is really important to call the WMA if it's not on the maps, which I'm going to show you here in a minute, or if it is on the maps, to discuss with them where you're allowed to camp and if there's any restrictions to that. So there is camping allowed on the WMAs. Another thing to point out, before you trap on any wildlife management area or the outdoor recreation area, you need to go online and get a trapping permit and permission to trap on the WMAs. If you go online again at fw.ky.gov and go to trapping, it lays out what you need to do to get permission to trap on WMAs. And then just some other just simple rules. You're not allowed to shoot a firearm 100 yards from a residence. Just some other general rules that you need to read and look over as you go forward. Another rule that's not in here that I ran into a lot on Clay WMA is the question about using bikes on the WMA. When I say bikes, I mean pedal bike, mountain bikes. They are not allowed on WMAs, and that's to try to cut back on the interference that some people may be using bikes riding on the WMAs while people try to hunt. So I just want to bring that out and make sure everybody does know that you are not allowed to use bikes on the WMAs. So this is the second page of this. So it's pretty much 2 pages of an overview of what's the general rules on the WMA. Just to go over and look at. Another one to point out is if you hunt on a WMA during a quota hunt, a muzzleloader hunt, anything with a firearm that you're required to have hunter orange on. If you're in a blind, you have to have a hat or a vest or something orange that can be seen from all directions on top of the blind to ensure that other people know you're there and can be hunted safely. And you also have to have the orange on while you're in the blind. Just another thing. As far as deer hunting on a WMA, if some of these WMAs, if you hike back into the WMAs and you want to bring the deer out, in the state of Kentucky, you are allowed to quarter and process your deer and bring it out. But to do so, you have to either have the head or leave sex organ on the animal so it can be identified. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, in the state of Kentucky, before you move a deer, you have to fill out your hunter log, which basically includes the date, the sex of the animal, and the county you harvested the deer in. You do not have to have it checked in until midnight, the night you harvested the deer. But you do have to have your hunter log filled out before you move the deer. So it's something to keep in mind. Even if you quarter it or don't quarter it, that has to be filled out. Another thing on hunting, you have to have, if you buy your license and you're using your phone, you have to have an ID with you showing who you are and be able to see your phone. I always do like printing mine and keeping it with me, even if it's on my phone, because we all know phones die, and you need to be able to prove that you have a hunting license while you're on the WMAs. All right. So next, we're going to jump into trying to figure out where you want to hunt. Once you've looked over the general rules, the next step is trying to figure out where you want to hunt in the state of Kentucky. And I'm going to go through the process on how you determine what regulations are set for the WMA or hunter access area that you may want to hunt. So here on page 28, we have a map of the state by region. And basically it's broken down by region and then numbers, and you can see the name of the WMAs next to them. Once you determine what region the WMA is in and what number it is, you can then move on to the next page. And I chose the Northwest to look at. So this is what you'll see. Each region has a chart like this with their WMAs listed for all the numbers that are represented on this map. So once you determine what area you want to hunt, you flip on over and you find the region and then the corresponding number of the WMA, and you have the WMA right here on the left-hand side of the chart and the phone number from that WMA. This is a pretty key point right here, is if you ever get confused or have questions, and I get confused and have questions myself trying to figure out what's in and out on other WMAs across the state that I'm not used to. So pick up a phone and call. The people who run the WMAs would be glad to answer your questions and try to point you in the right direction. So feel free to use those numbers right there. And the WMAs underneath that don't have special regulations, you'll see down at the bottom. If they're not in the chart, down at the bottom, it says open under statewide regulations. So if it says open under statewide regulations and it's down here, it's pretty evident that you just go based on what the regular regulations are for all hunting seasons throughout the state. If there's any kind of special regulations, they'll be found in this chart. And as you can see, there's a lot of numbers. There's a lot of colors. It can get kind of confusing. So basically, the first thing to do is to find your WMA, which I'm going to take clay WMA, and work through this process. So first, find clay WMA. Let's go over here, and squirrel, for example, is all blue. So squirrel is under statewide regulations for clay WMA. So you also go to rabbit. You see this number here with rabbit. So it's number 3. So you need to drop down and look at the special regulations for rabbit on Clay WMA. It's stated in number 3, which rabbit on Clay WMA is open from November 1st to December 31st, except for closed during the quota hunt and closed to the pheasant hunt area on the December 3rd and 7th. So those are the specific dates that the area is closed or you're limited access for rabbit hunting on Clay WMA. And as you look through here, there's underneath quail and grouse, you actually you can only hunt 2 days a week from November 1st to December 31st, and you have to check in and fill out a card. So basically, once you determine what WMA you'd like to hunt, basically go through, find the species you want to look at. So deer muzzleloader on Clay WMA is open to statewide eggs. Youth season, open to statewide eggs. Modern gun, the yellow, you go over and it's quota hunt. So we'll talk about quota hunts and how to apply for them here in just a minute, but just trying to figure out how to use this chart because it can kind of get cumbersome as you move through stuff. And again, if there's any questions about this, please pick up your phone and give us a call and we'll help you out. We'll point you in the right direction. So that's the numbers, and you see these little asterisks next to the WMA. If you go to the second page following this, you'll find out other restrictions, and it spells out the other restrictions that are on the WMA that may, like access may be closed or just special things besides just the like Grayson Lake WMA, Camp Webb is closed to all hunting. So it's just special things they want you to recognize about the WMA. So just make sure that when you look at this chart, there's a lot going on, but just concentrate on your species and what the restrictions may be for your species. All right, quota hunts. So in the state of Kentucky, we have deer quota hunts, pheasant quota hunts, and waterfowl quota hunts that we put on our WMAs throughout the year. In the guide on page 35, and I think goes through 38, I think, lays out the specifics on the quota hunts. The thing to keep in mind with the quota hunts is you apply online. For some of the quota hunts, there is a charge of $3 to put your name in the hat. And that runs from September 1st through September 30th. And you basically go online to apply for the hunts. In the hunting guide, it spells out right here, how to apply for a quota hunt. And basically you got, like I said, again, the deer hunts. With the deer hunts, there's preference points involved. Well, actually, with all the quota hunts, there's preference points involved, where if you don't get drawn, you gain a preference point, which means the following year you increase your odds of getting drawn. So we'll talk on further on so that's the deer hunt. The pheasant hunt, quota hunt is on 3 WMAs. You got Green River, Yellow Bank, and Clay WMA for the pheasant hunt. And there's also some mobility impaired quota hunts across the state. So if you're mobility impaired and qualify for that, you can put in for those hunts as well. The waterfowl quota hunts, you have ballard and sloughs and a mentor hunt that Minor Clark and Doug Travis WMAs that you can put into. And a mentor hunt is a mentor taking a youth and they can both hunt. Whereas just a youth hunt is just a youth can hunt for that. And then Sandhill Cranes, there's a quota hunt for it as well. And the waterfowl guide is probably another good thing to get to reference as far as the waterfowl goes and the seasons. There's also a dove quota hunt, and I do believe that closes this Friday. So go online and look up for the dove quota hunt to get put in for it. You actually put online for it, and you do not call in for it. So, and I will try actually when I get on our website. I'll see if I can't find that link for you all. All right, so this kind of talks about, well, it gives you the dates so you know when the deer quota hunts will be, and the WMAs, and kind of some remarks about each hunt. I'm going to stick with clay. So on clay WMA, you're allowed to have 4 deer, only which one can be antlered, which every quota hunted, there is no bonus bucks. If you kill a buck on a WMA during a quota hunt, it counts towards your state buck tag. The does, for example, on clay WMA, do not count against your deer numbers or your antlers deer in that zone. So they're kind of extra deer that you can come. And the reason why we do that is we try to incentivize it is because the populations are so high on these WMAs that we're trying to get the population back. I talked about the preference points there a minute ago. And as you'll see in this preference points column right here, how many preference points it took before you got drawn for that quota hunt the previous year. So Ballard, you had to have three preference points, which means you had to either not get drawn for 3 years or have went to one of these WMAs and got preference points for killing an antlerless deer. The rest of them, again, it's either 1 preference points or some of them are either no preference points. There's actually 2 pages of these. I think there was 30 some quota hunts. I'm not mistaken. Let me check real quick. 38 different quota hunts that you may be able to take a part in. So again, that's runs through September 1st through September 30th to put your name in the hat to get drawn for the quota hunts. All right, now we're going to jump into kind of, you've learned the regulations or you've looked over the regulations, you've determined where you wanted to hunt and the legal aspect. Real quick, there's one thing I did forget, parking on these WMAs, which I'll go over some of that in this mapping, but there's designated parking areas, which on the maps you'll see is designated by a P, or if you're on a WMA road, you can pull off to the side of the road if there's room, but you have to make sure that cars can get by and get through. And also do not block gates. If something was to happen to you or somebody else that we needed to get back through the gate to get you out or to do management or anything like that, we'll need to be able to get through the gates. So do not block the gates. But other than that, as far as parking goes, designated areas and then any kind of wide spot that you can get off to park. All right. All right, there's 2 links here that I'm going to kind of show. One in general, the public land interactive maps. I'm going to take you through step by step on this, on how to look at the interactive maps and what you can do with them. And then I'm also going to show you a habitat map that was made for clay WMA to show where management's being done and what type of management is that may help you plan out your hunt and kind of talk you through that process. Okay, so again, I've been talking about the fw.ky.gov. This is where that link gets you to our web page. There's a lot of information here. I'm going to just kind of show you how to get to the mapping aspect of it. Basically, you just go to the hunting tab. You can scroll down. And this is something to think about too, is if you're new to hunting or new to a certain type of hunting, you may have hunted deer your whole life, but maybe wanted to hunt grouse. There is information about each species here that you can click on and read about it to kind of get yourself introduced to it. So you can kind of go to those pages to learn about what you may be looking for to try to hunt and how you can do it. we'll jump into what we're trying to look at right now, and that's to find a place to hunt. So there is an interactive map right here at the very get-go that you can kind of start at. If you click on that, it brings you into the whole state and shows all the public hunting access areas. If you don't know, the orange is any of the federal property. So Daniel Boone National Forest running north and south and the far east, Fort Knox, Land Between the Lakes, Fort Campbell. So then the green is our WMAs or our hunting access areas for you to look at. I'm going to zoom in, and this is just kind of an overview. We're going to get into, there's some other interactive maps and some other areas that show a little bit more information, but we're just going to zoom in to, again, I'm going to use Clay WMA because I'm most familiar with this area, so maybe a little biased, but as like I said, if you zoom on into the area, it has the roads, it has parking areas. I know for a fact that if as you drive through here, you know, there's a pull off right here. That's the end. There's a gate there, but there's multiple areas you can pull off on the side of the road. You can also go through here, and this is a topographic map, which I think you all are going to talk in the later part of this series on how to use a topo map. So I won't dive into that very much, but you also have base map information on this. And I'm not for sure what the aerial photography is on this one. But I'm going to show you another interactive map where you can go back and forth with different years and what that shows you. So that kind of brings in the WMA all together. If you have a smartphone, you can get on the web page and you can look at the map and see while you're there, zoom in and out certain fields and that kind of stuff. So that's one option as far as the interactive map goes. All right, the next option is to actually choose the WMA that you want to look at. And there's a little more detailed and more specific maps, some PDF maps. Let's jump into, so the one thing is you will have to know the county your WMA is in that you want to hunt. It could be in multiple counties or one. So Nicholas County shows up, Clay WMAs in Nicholas County. We can go back, let's see. Also go back, I'll show you one that has multiple WMAs or hunting areas. So Bath County has all these WMAs or hunting areas in it that you may look. So whatever county has, all the WMAs that are in that county will show up for you to select. So once you hit on your WMA, there's some nice facts about it, just general, the size of it, what counties, the top, the elevation, lat and long. So if you want to drive to it, that's usually lat and long is usually to the main office or towards the center of the WMA. Kind of a brief habitat description on the page, and then regulations. So once they get the regulations up to date, like I said, the hunting guide just came off the press, so they haven't updated this information yet. But eventually, there will be some of the hunting regulations be laid out into this. But what I want to dive into more is every WMA will have the explore the area with the interactive map. So again, it's kind of the same thing as what the first map I showed you was, but there's a little more information in here that I've found useful. Again, I'm going to go to Clay WMA just because I know it pretty well, but I've used this this tool to help me pinpoint areas to chase grouse with. It works out pretty well. The base map up here in this interactive map, there's multiple years of imagery that show up. And this can kind of be used for, again, I've used it to try to find grouse cover to chase grouse, but you could also use this to determine maybe if an area is kind of grown up over the years and maybe a good bedding area. Sometimes this aerial photography can help you pick out cedar thickets. The pictures are taken at the right time. I've even been able to tell, kind of train my eye to look for even oak stands with some of this imagery. So it's pretty cool to just sit around with an example of what it would look like as far as using it to key in on, say, a grouse cut. You see this area right here in 2010. This is a stand of ash that we harvested in 2015 before the emerald ash borer came in and killed it off. Still an established stand. So 2016, so 15 is when we actually cut this stand. So in Daniel Boone National Forest is where I've used this, this kind of method before to kind of pinpoint areas that have changed over time and focus my efforts in hunting. So you can see in 10, it was nothing. 2016, it was cut. And then you can see last year in 2020, it's starting to grow back. So that's still 4 or 5 years old, still a little too young for what I would go chasing grouse in, but it's working its way that way. So, this tool is nice to have, nice to use to help you zoom in and look at different years, air photography, and try to key in on stuff. This one also shows a whole lot more of the horse trail. Like these are all horse trails that are on here, fishing spots, canoe put-ins and put-outs. So on Clay WMA, there's 12 miles worth of paddling that you can do on the Licking River. And there's some put-ins and put-outs that shows you where they're at. So there's a little more detailed information on the WMAs in this interactive map than what's on that first one. So it's a little more specific to the WMAs, and the other one's kind of a general interactive map. So that's kind of the interactive map on general. We can zoom into another one. And you can see there's also in this, there's other canoe for fishing, canoe, kayak. Some of these may actually have, so yeah. So if you click on them, you can identify them. Let's see if this one, if they actually say if it's a boat ramp or not. It's a horse trail. So this one here is a boat ramp. It does not actually, it's not specific on if it's a boat ramp or not, or if it's just a canoe or kayak put in. Again, pick up a phone and give us a call. And if you have a question about one of those, and we'll figure it out for you if you have any questions. So this interactive map has a whole lot more details on the fish and wildlife side of things than the first one. It's a little more specific. All right. All right. So, and then I want to show you, we're in the process, the department's in the process of actually putting our WMAs in a tiering system, which tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 WMAs, which means tier 1 is going to have someone on site. It's going to have a whole lot of active management. Tier 2 may have some management.
So I think we just lost Jacob. He was getting to a point where some of the WMAs that are going to have people on site and have a lot of projects going on and a lot of habitat projects, they're going to create habitat maps. And so I just put in the chat the Clay WMA habitat map. And so if you have the capability and you want to open that up and check that out, it looks a lot like the interactive map that we were just looking at. Okay, let's look at some of these questions that came in. So would a tier system let potential poachers know where people, where the game wardens are not generally because of their lower tier? No, I don't think that the tier system is necessarily has anything to do with how our officers are going to be patrolling. So that's a good question, though. It would probably be to the potential lawbreaker's mistake to assume that. I think our officers will maintain their patrol as normal. All right. And the next question is, how can I find out how many preference points are currently required to make the 10% cut for the Ballard rifled deer? Great question, John. I am going to let Jacob take that question if he can get back on.
Can you hear me, Becky?
I can hear you.
All right. Sorry about that. I don't know how long I just talked till I realized you emailed me. But I jumped in. I heard that the last question about how can you tell how many points. That all depends on for this year. That depends on who puts in. I will say Ballard has pretty well been 3 points for quite a while. I would assume, that's why we post that in the hunting guide, so you can kind of wrap your mind around what it will take for you to get drawn, so you can help you make your decision on where to go. So hopefully that answered your question. Hey Becky, can you tell me, was I looking at, were you all seeing the Clay WMA interactive map when I got off?
You were just about to open up you were discussing the tier system and you were just about to show the habitat map.
All right, so the tier system is and I also heard the question about law enforcement. The tier system will not dictate how law enforcement interacts with the WMA. I think I don't want to misspeak, but I do believe that at this point, I think we're almost to one officer per county, getting close to it. So, your officer should be covering your county with, even the WMA that's not that's a tier 3 will still have the same law enforcement presence as it was before. So I don't. That is not going to be used for as far as law enforcement goes. The only thing it's really being used for is to help the public, one, see where they can expect to see management and where we're working to push management versus where we can't get to manage. So again, that's in its just now coming out and rolling out here. They're on the process of figuring out which WMAs will be what tier and that kind of stuff. So that being said, I'm going to share my screen and start looking at the Clay WMA interactive map for habitat management and try to talk you through on how it may be able to be used to help you pick out a hunting spot. Here we go. So now if everybody can see the interactive map on Clay WMA, there is a whole lot of stuff going on in this map. If you try to look at it with every one of these layers on, it's going to confuse you. So the best thing to do is when I'm looking at this, I think in my head, what are the needs of the animal I'm hunting? Where are they going to be located? And how can I use this to inform my decision on where to hunt? Let's go with deer first and kind of get some of these layers off here. Not saying that some of these layers may not also be good to take in consideration, but just to make it so it's a nice, clear view. And you can turn stuff on and off like I'm doing to try to help you formalize your plans. So what you're looking at here, if you look at your legend now, is all the neon green is where our predominantly oak stands are on Clay WMA. As you can see, the main unit is pretty well mapped out. Some of the other units of clay we have not gotten to them to map them out to lay out where the oak stands are. But if you look at the green, if you were to go to these areas on your map, you would be standing, you're 99% sure that you'll be standing in oaks or hickories as the predominant trees. So in a good mast year, it's a good idea to try to target these areas. And then to also look for the gray area is timber harvest. And all this timber harvest on here is pretty hard cut. It's more of a ash harvest, cedar harvest. It's going to be really thick bedding areas. So if you take a really thick bedding area and put it up close to an oak stand, come September, October, that's probably going to be a pretty good place to hit if there's oaks coming. There's also some water holes on here. Another thing to think about, if you can get the water, the cover, and the oaks all in one place, again, it kind of limits, it kind of takes you down and helps you target where you may want to hunt. You can also start looking for summer annuals. So summer annuals, if it's not a very good oak year, these summer annuals are usually soybeans, millet, cowpeas, stuff like that, that will be providing some food that you may want to try to target if there's not oaks in it this year, as well as your clover fields. Your yellow is your clover fields. So this stuff is kept up to date pretty regularly, at least once or twice a year. They'll get in here and update some of these layers and show you the management. And again, you can play with this. Another good thing, turkey hunting. Clover fields, good places for strutting. Prescribed fire. I've seen many turkeys scratching in smoke. They're wanting to get in the field so bad. So any place we do prescribed fire, which is usually done in February, March, sometimes in a little bit of April, these areas will be burnt off for the most part. Good strutting zones, good places for turkey to be out hitting and feeding. And then as well as your winter annuals from this year. So next spring, those will all be clover and winter wheat fields. So you can kind of start putting on layers on here to figure out where you may want to target for hunting. Another one, I'm a big upland hunter. The summer annuals, the winter annuals, and your fallow fields. Those are the areas I target when I'm chasing quail. Those areas will, if I'm going to find quail, I'll usually find them in one of those areas, along with areas that may have been burnt that following spring. The cover is usually thinner, and they utilize it a whole lot more as far as for quail hunting. And again, the same kind of thing I showed you for grouse on the other interactive map. Timber management, all that right there, pretty well from 2011 to now has had some kind of harvest done on it. So if there's any grouse, and there has been grouse here in the past, we're hoping that these areas will turn into and hold some grouse. But if you turn around and you take this same map and look at timber management at Dewey Lake or Grayson Lake, Kentucky Ridge, any of these places that do timber management, you can use this stuff to try to figure out where you're going to pinpoint. Now, unfortunately, grouse aren't like quail. You build it and the next year they come. It's a process. So it's something that you kind of look at 10 years down the road. I may try to go hit this spot. So moving forward, the plan is to try to get this kind of information out there for the public to use to help them plan. Again, you can actually open this up, there's an app, ArcGIS Explorer, that you can go on and open up and then look up clay WMA habitat map on the app, and it'll actually show you where you're at on the WMA with these layers on it. So it really does put you right in where you're at, so you can kind of hone in on where you want to hunt. All right. And then while I'm here, you can also go to view printable PDF if you just want a map of the area. At this point, the department does not have maps on site for WMAs to give out, but there's maps for every WMA just like this that shows the parking and any other kind of information, fishing, canoe put-ins, put-outs, all that kind of stuff. So each WMA will have maps like this as well. Which I'm getting ready to talk to you about another app that I find useful that will utilize these PDFs for you to have in you while you're in the field, so you know where you are on the WMA without telephone service. So just keep that in mind here in just a minute as I talk through the process of getting that downloaded to look at. All right. So now I'm just going to show you on one more little thing here. And this is not the only app there is. There's all kinds of mapping apps out there. You're going to talk to Onyx Maps here, I think in the third part of this series. But this is a Venza app. It's free of charge. I like using it. Again, I'm going to show you, just flip through the process here. If you download the Venza maps, and then we've went through this already looking at, so this is all on your phone. So you get the Venza maps app, and then you go to our website and pretty well follow the same steps I've shown you earlier. You go to our web page, you go to hunting on the right, you go to Nicholas County, and then you click on Clay WMA. Once you get to Nicholas County, you go to view printable PDF maps, and the PDF map shows up. And just like you're going to send this to somebody, you push the little box with the arrow on it, and then you go and select the Venza maps, and it actually pulls that PDF into Venza maps, which then once you get on site at Clay WMA or any one of these WMAs that you pull this in before you go, you open that up and it'll actually put a dot. While you're on site, it'll put a dot where you're at on the WMA. So it doesn't really show you any more than where you're at. You can put pins on this and come back to it, and you can measure stuff out. So there's other apps out there that are that you can do a little bit more on adding stuff and planning and showing you stuff. But I do like this for a real quick. I just want to throw something on so I can get around there today and not get lost. This is a good app to have as far as for PDFs and using offline. All right. That's about all I got, Becky. As far as I've went through, covered a whole lot. Hopefully I didn't skip over too much for you all. Hopefully y'all found it entertaining. But any questions y'all have, I'll feel free to try to answer them. If I can't answer them, we'll get somebody who can.
All right. We do have quite a few questions in the chat here. And so if you can stop sharing your screen for now and see if does your camera still work, Jacob?
Yeah, I just got to turn it on.
Cool. All right. Awesome. So I'm just trying to get to the top here because we've had questions come in a little early. So something I was hoping maybe you can talk a little bit more about. You talked about the quota hunts for the mobility impaired quota hunts. What
Mhm.
other options do we have on public land for mobility impaired?
There are a few handicapped accessible WMAs that are lined out, and there's special regs that go along with that. Um, I'll be quite honest with you, I can't speak to those very much. So I do know there are WMAs that have handicap access. If whoever that is wants to put a number in or wants to email you or me, Becky, we can get somebody hooked up with them to point them in a good direction. To answer that question better.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. We can do that. I'll save that information here. So John was wondering, where can buck antler age and weight measurement data for WMAs be found?
That is collected through the quota hunts, and to my knowledge, that has not been made available to the public. So I at this point in time, it's not available to the public that I know of. Now, again, call the WMAs, call the offices, talk to them. You won't have to poke them too hard to get the information. They should help you out. Try to help you out understand what kind of quality of deer are being taken off the WMAs.
Alrighty. And how many preference points are needed for the waterfowl hunts?
I can't answer that either. I do know that Ballard and the sloughs are both pretty sought after hunts. So I can't answer it to you exactly how many. We don't post that on there.
Oh, so it's, can you help me walk through that a little bit, Jacob? It's the process of applying to gain points and eventually.
Oh, okay. So there is an option that you can choose not to get drawn and gain a point. So there's an option when you go to sign up, because if you don't sign up and you don't pay to keep a point, you lose your points too. So there is an option when you go from that September 1 to the 30th. There's an option for you to choose to keep your preference point, to gain a preference point and not be drawn. I hope that answered the question.
You helped me fill in the blank there a little bit, Jacob. But if there's a follow-up question to that, please feel free to put that in the chat and I'll get down to it in just a second. Let's see what our next question was here. We did kind of already talk about this, about the tier system not affecting our law enforcement officers' patrol patterns or anything like that.
That's correct. That won't be. That's not the idea behind. There won't necessarily be an increased law enforcement. Law enforcement covers everything pretty well already, and they'll continue that.
Okay, and this is another preference point question. How do you find out how many preference points are currently required to make the 10% cut for Ballard rifled deer?
So I'm assuming this person is probably out of state with the 10%. That is kind of a question. It'll depend on how many out of state people put in and get drawn. So if you have 3 points, but there's a whole bunch of out of state people who have 4 points and the 10% cap is reached, then you won't get drawn. So I can't. There's not really a good answer to that on how I could help you know that.
That's all right.
It's kind of up to who puts in and how many points they have is how that will happen.
Okay. Rick, I'm looking at your question here. You might have to help me. Sorry, I'm not following directly. It says, is there a centralized location for each of the addresses you have listed and how to reach the quota hunts and interactive maps? wondering if you're thinking of the web address.
So yeah, I mean the fw.ky.gov will get you to the front page that holds all this information we talked about tonight. The quota hunts. We just redid our web page, and I would assume that come September 1st, you will be able to. There'll be a quota hunt button to be able to click right on the front page, but I can't promise that for sure. But if not, go to hunting, and there's a quota hunt page that you can get to. Oh, and actually, I take that back. When you to apply for the quota hunts, you actually go through the My Profile button and apply for the quota hunts. So you got to log in to the My Profile to register for the hunts. Sorry.
All right, and this information might not be compiled in public either, but it was what are the top 5 WMAs for mature buck harvests? I don't know if we have anything like that available.
We've never sat down and looked at that. You know, a good rule of thumb is look at the WMAs that are most sought after, and those are probably the ones that annually have produced the larger bucks. But I will say that probably every WMA you have a chance if you put the work into it to kill a good mature buck though on a quota hunt.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. There's just so much opportunity out there. All right, and I'll go ahead and take this one, Jacob. There was a question, as a first-time hunter, is there any known groups that would take a first-timer out? And actually, you're in the right spot, in the right place so far, because our Field to Fork program in a normal year does host mentored hunts, and we do partner with sportsmen's clubs and non-government organization groups like the National Deer Association to try and host workshops and follow-up hunts for beginner hunters. So keep an eye out on that fw.ky.gov/field to fork webpage, because that's where we post all the registration information for that kind of stuff. And also there is an email list that you can subscribe to on the Field to Fork webpage as well. And we will send information to that email list. So stay tuned for that kind of information. All right, so the next question was, John C. Williams is completely closed to modern firearm, however, shows open for youth gun. So am I correct to believe I can take a youth hunter with a modern firearm?
1 minute, I'll try to look in this book and see. If not, I will give you the number to call.
Yeah, so this is where you would be using that table there.
John C. Williams is open to youth gun based on this chart. As far as I can tell, it is. Again, I'm not up to date with all this. If you feel uncomfortable with what I'm telling you, which like I said, by the chart, it is open to youth modern gun. But there is the phone number there you can call. That phone number, Becky, if you want to put it in there for him, is 502-477-9024.
All right, I just dropped that in the chat there. Okay, let's get down here to our next question. Okay, this is a good one. On reporting where you have harvested an animal, so telecheck, I'm going to fill in there. If you're in a place where the county lines meet, how do you know where you are?
If you're talking about a WMA, this is something else to keep in mind. The way the regs are written on a WMA, it's the whole WMA goes based on the most liberal zone there is. So if you're hunting two different, if a WMA is split, Grayson Lake WMA is a good one for this. I do believe it's split by a 2 and a 3. You go by the most liberal regs. And again, the whole idea behind when you call this in is to do the best of your ability to tell what county you're in. If there's mapping stuff, but just do the best of your ability to check it in into the county you think it is. Yeah. So Grayson Lake WMA is an example of this. Either Carter or Elliott. It splits is a 2 and a 3. So the whole WMA is a zone 2. So that's something to remember when you're hunting WMAs as far as deer regs go. You go with the most liberal zone, and that's where it is. So when you call it in that situation, it doesn't necessarily matter as far as the zone goes, but we do like to try to keep the data as close as we can to which county it came out of. That feeds into the deer model and that kind of stuff. But try to do your best to tell where you're at and report it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very popular question and a good one too.
Yeah.
So Jason was wondering if Fish and Wildlife has an app or just the website. And right now, correct me if I'm wrong, Jacob, we just have our website.
The only other app that I can tell you about is, again, let me see if I can, let me find it on here. And I do believe anybody can get this app. If you can see it, can you see the Arc Explorer app? To the
It's the green circle with the white.
Circle with the white. That is Explorer. If you type in Arc Explorer, if you go to that one, you can go to the Clay WMA habitat map. And I do believe there at one point the rest of our stuff had it, but it's not there's all kinds of maps on here that you can go look at stuff on that app. So I'm not for sure if Kentucky Fish and Wildlife at this point has anything directly for it besides that one.
Yes, and a little bit earlier in the chat, I was able to drop the link for that ArcGIS Explorer app. And I've personally used it. I've used it in areas that have low cell service, and it works pretty well. I like it. So let's see. Richard, we've been talking about a couple different app options tonight, so I'm not quite sure. We've talked about Explorer and
Avenza.
And we mentioned Onyx too. All right. Heather says, I'm feeling a little lost in the mapping information. Let's say I'm a new hunter with no steady mentor. How do I even start to decide where to hunt? I understand how to look at the layers and on the map. But is there a more basic way to know how or where to start?
Like I said, I went really quick through that, trying to lay it out so you could look. And basically, what like just any type of hunting and in beginning is the key is to get to where that deer wants to be. So that's why I was trying to point out the oak stands for the acorns come September, October, or the clover fields or the wheat fields in late winter. So you kind of use the map to choose what layers you want to show where that deer may or may not be. And then from that point, it does going to take some legwork to get out and do some scouting to verify if you see any sign in those areas to start to hunt. So really the basics you need to know is where do deer want to be, because that's where I want to be, and what time of year will they be there. And if you can answer those kind of questions, some basic knowledge of how the deer act and move, again, that's why I pointed out the timber harvest. Those are going to be really thick bedding areas. So if you can find a really thick bedding area, close to a food source that's real close, the deer don't want to move. And then again, come rut, you want to find out where the does are and be there waiting. So it's just trying to get some general knowledge of what you're looking for, and then using the map to see where that is on the landscape.
Perfect. Yes. So JB is still looking for some clarification on what WMAs are open to statewide firearm deer. And that's, if you reference back JB to your table again, that's going to be a great place to start, but I'll let you take over, Jacob.
Yeah, basically, if you go to each one of your, whichever region you're closest in, and you go to modern gun, deer modern gun, and go straight down that column, anything that's blue with no numbers or blue with a number that has some kind of restrictions will be open for statewide to gun season, modern gun. If you just basically, like I said, just use the chart, go from modern gun, and then kind of go over and see which area that is. But anything that's blue with no numbers, there's no restrictions, it's open to modern gun.
Perfect. And we have a lot of opportunity, a lot of public land opportunity for modern gun, a lot more than people expect. So get out there and take advantage of that stuff. During a quota hunt, can you use a modern centerfire rifle for deer hunting? What are the advantages? This is a two-part question. The second part is, what are the advantages to applying for a quota hunt?
So the areas that have a quota hunt will not be open to statewide gun hunting. So a lot of times it's a good opportunity to hunt an area that is not going to be hunted very hard. And the areas we try to, like Clay WMA, the way it's set up is theoretically, if everybody spaces out, each person should have about 40 acres to hunt, based on the number of people we draw versus the number of acres available. So it's an opportunity to have some place to go deer hunt that is controlled on the number of people that are there. So the advantage is getting an opportunity to use a gun in a place that doesn't get gun hunted regularly.
And so you kind of
go ahead.
You kind of already hinted to the first half is that you can use the modern centerfire rifle.
I'm not aware of any WMA that is restrictive on not using a modern firearm. I'm pretty sure that every quota hunt you are allowed to use a modern firearm, but you don't have to either. I've actually seen somebody show up to use a bow too. So, but it's just, but most people use a modern firearm or shotgun for the quota hunts.
And we've talked a lot about the preference points. So for someone who really doesn't know what the point of a preference point is, what is the advantage of gaining points?
Well, the advantage of gaining points is basically when you go to sign up for a quota hunt, you have multiple, you can choose a first preference, second preference. I do believe you get all the way down to a third preference. So if you choose Ballard and only have 2 points, but hope you get drawn, but then choose another WMA, I'm going to say Clay, and you had 1 point. If you get drawn for Clay, you lose your points. So you go to Clay. But if you just want Ballard, you just put in and you don't get drawn, you get another preference point. You keep building up. The idea of just gaining a preference point is I'm not going to be able to hunt this year, or I don't really want to hunt anywhere else but Ballard, and it takes 3 points. So I'm going to put in for preference points to build it up to get to Ballard. But most of the time it's used to cover somebody to keep their points from a lack of being able to hunt 1 year. So it is most of the time what that's used for.
All right. And I'm not familiar off the top of my head with this area, but do you know who has the primary responsibility or I guess authority over Fort Campbell? Is it Kentucky or Tennessee?
Well, that's Army base, so it's going to be they set their own seasons, their own. I mean, they can do what they want on the federal property. So neither Kentucky or Tennessee state agencies have authority over Fort Campbell.
Nice. Okay. We had another question that was wondering how to find out which WMAs are open for waterfowl hunting, other than Ballard. And so,
The best way to do it is there will be a waterfowl guide that'll come out that'll show you the restrictions for WMAs. And if there are not restrictions in the guide for the WMA, then it's open to statewide regs. So the waterfowl guide is what you want to hit on for waterfowl.
yes, perfect. There's a question that there used to be a WMA in Lewis County along the Ohio that's not there anymore. And will it come back?
Yeah, it was a really nice WMA. We hated to lose it. I do believe it became a factory of some sort. For some reason, in the back of my head, I'm thinking it became a dynamite factory, but I may be totally wrong on that. But it is some kind of factory at this point. So no, it won't be coming back.
So what are some good WMAs for squirrel hunting? And I'm going to say, fortunately, Kentucky, I mean, we've got a great squirrel population across the state. If you're looking, Jacob, you can go ahead, whatever your thoughts are here, but I was thinking.
I I can't say that there's one that's going to be better than the other. They all, again, in general, you find a good oak hickory stand, and you should be able to find some squirrels. There's none that I know that are just standouts that I heard of, but pretty well any WMA that you can find some oak hickory on is good. And some of this hunting on public land, you'll definitely learn that it's gonna take some boot leather to figure out some of the stuff that's available and not available. You'll have some good days and some bad, but I actually find it as a welcome challenge sometimes to spend the time to figure an area out.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do, just to echo that, Jacob, is to look at new property and just kind of go out there and figure it out. Okay, so you mentioned earlier, I believe this was along the dove quota topic. Peter was looking for some more details about what closes on Friday the 13th in regards to dove hunting.
Say that again. What closes on?
I think you mentioned Friday the 13th, or was it?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's Friday the 13th. There's a mentor dove hunt. I think there's 3 locations. I think Green River, Kentucky River WMA, and one other one I can't remember. That's available to put in for a mentor hunt. So basically, they draw, and the youth get the first shot at these fields before the adults get to hunt it.
Right, and I'm going to drop that link in here.
Looks like somebody may have dropped it in there.
Oh, look, Chris beat me to it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm not familiar with this acronym, but Rachel was wondering, what about TVA properties? How do you telecheck on those properties?
Did you say TVA properties?
Rachel, if you could spell that out for us. I don't think we're familiar with TVA.
Yeah, I'm assuming you say Tennessee Valley Authorities properties, and I may assume that you're meaning land between the lakes. Um,
No, if Rachel chimes in, can clear that up for us, we'll come back to you. We'll come back to that question for you. Let's see. So this is a decent conservation type question. Why do some of the WMAs restrict hunting of certain animals?
it's dependent on what the population is on that WMA, is why we may or may not restrict hunting. Some of you may or may not remember during the quail restoration project that we had going there for our 10-year project, we restricted some access to Clay WMA, Peabody WMA, made them quota hunts, restricted that to actually see if to take hunting out of the equation to see if the populations were coming back. So basically, it's information based on biological reasoning on if the species can support hunting. Would be the reason why we would not allow hunting of a species on a WMA.
Okay, and it looks like, yes, Tennessee Valley Authority, non-rec properties. There are several up around the lake that aren't recognized by state maps, but are legally huntable.
I'm not familiar with those, Rachel. I'd assume, as far as if you're asking about how to check them in, if you know you have access to hunt them, and it's all legal, then you would just telecheck it like normal. But I can't speak to those properties and as far as if they're huntable or not huntable. But as far as there's no special regs, so you would just telecheck it just like any other WMA.
All right. John was wondering how EHD was this year, if there were heavy hit areas and if they rebounded.
To my knowledge, we have not had a heavy EHD year. There may have been one or two that have come across, but to my knowledge, EHD has not been a huge problem this year. But of course, we're just now getting into July, August, September. We're starting to get to the point where it could get dry and you could start having some issues. But up to this point, I'm not aware of EHD being a huge issue across the state. And as far as rebounding goes, yeah, all the areas that have been hit over the past 4 or 5 years, they're all slowly rebounding.
Perfect. He had another question here. Is Peabody, does it have as much pressure as is rumored during rifle season?
I've never been out on Peabody myself, so I can't tell you what the pressure is there, but they do harvest quite a few deer off Peabody. So I would assume that the pressure is probably pretty heavy. It's open under statewide regs as far as deer hunting goes. So again, that's kind of the advantage of a quota hunt. You do kind of get a restriction of people that are there. So I'm sure Peabody's hunted pretty heavy.
Okay. There's a question about pheasants, if they're released just for quota hunts.
Yes, they're just released for quota hunts. They're released the night before. There's 3 days at each area, and the birds for each night, for each day of hunting, are released the night prior.
All right. Sorry, I'm being slow. There's a lot in the chat. Just trying to. Oh, actually, it looks like we got down to the end here. So we got 2 more things here. let's see. Some pretty common questions here. John's wondering if we have a wild hog population in the state.
Wild hog populations, we have scattered populations across the state, which we're glad they're scattered and hopefully decreasing as we speak. That is one thing we do not want to get established on our public lands. Is not good for the ecosystems, for any other species around. They're really destructive animals. So at this point, there may be a few WMAs that have a scattered hog on them, but no huge populations. And hopefully we keep pushing down the road of getting them eradicated from the state.
Yes, definitely. And so for bear hunting in Kentucky, there was a question about the best location for that. In most of our populations, we do have the bear zones. I'll actually look that up while Jacob fills in real quick and post that here.
Yeah, we have the bear zones. And basically, if you kind of, I don't know if y'all can, there's the bear zones. It's kind of a busy map again with the regs. And the bear regs are listed in that chart, that blue chart. So if you go to the public lands and go to bear, it'll list if you can or cannot hunt bear on that WMA.
Perfect. What's the policy on retrieving game that may cross from public land to private land after the shot's taken?
It would be the same reg as it would be as far as from private land to private land. Just because you were on public land when you shot the animal doesn't give you the right to cross that fence onto private land without permission, and getting permission to retrieve your animal of being wounded. So definitely that is always an issue if you're hunting close to the property line. So I'd get to figuring out who owns next to it. So if you do have that issue, you can touch base with them.
Definitely. And we're gotten down to the last question. So, and we're kind of coming up on the end of our time here. So if you have any more questions, don't be afraid to throw them in here. Last one I see is, what does it mean when a WMA says for camping, check with the owner? I'm looking for areas to backpack, hunt turkey and small game.
I'm assuming what that means. I didn't read exactly checking with owner, but I'm assuming what that will mean, or what that does mean, is to check with the WMA for where you're allowed to camp. The majority of our WMAs, you're restricted to camping in certain areas, which most of those areas that I'm aware of are right off the main roads. As far as backpacking in and camping on most of our WMAs, that would be against most regs. But again, feel free to give the WMA a call and make sure I'm not wrong on that. I don't know all the details across all the WMAs, but the one place you may look at is Daniel Boone National Forest. That would be a good place to start as far as backpacking in and be able to camp and hunt and all that kind of stuff all in one place.
All right. I think that's it. So we're getting some thank yous. And Jacob, thank you so much for all of your insight.
Now, there's a whole lot of information here, and the main thing to remember is don't be scared to jump on the public land and hunt it. It's a wonderful opportunity. I enjoy it a whole lot myself. If you have questions, don't be scared to ask. Don't let it overwhelm you. We're here to give you the information to help you be successful. So feel free to holler at us.
Thank you all again for hanging out, for coming to the first of our 3-part webinar series. The next webinar is going to be this Thursday. That's August 12th, and it's going to be at the same time, same place. We'll be back here on Zoom. We'll be with a representative from Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and we'll start promptly at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. So thank you all, and we'll see you next week.